When my husband's mistress moved into what she thought was their dream house, she had no idea I owned the property and that her eviction notice was already being prepared. What started as the most devastating betrayal of my life became the sweetest revenge I could have never planned. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My hands trembled as I stared at the photo Jasmine had just sent me. There, sprawled across the burgundy leather couch in my family's lakeside cabin in Millbrook Heights, was my husband Derek, with the blonde woman I'd never seen before. Her legs were draped over his lap, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist, both of them laughing at something on his phone. The timestamp showed it was taken just 3 hours ago. "I'm so sorry, Camilla," Jasmine whispered through the phone, her voice thick with emotion. "I debated whether to tell you, but you deserve to know. I was driving past the cabin to check on my grandmother's place next door when I saw Derek's car. I thought maybe you two were having a romantic getaway, so I stopped by to say hello, but instead, she discovered my husband of 15 years in the arms of another woman, in the very cabin where we'd spent our honeymoon, where we'd brought our twin daughters Hazel and Ruby for countless summer vacations, where we'd planned to retire someday. Who is she?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. "I don't know," Jasmine replied. She answered the door like she owned the place, introduced herself as Scarlett, and said Derek was in the shower. "She was wearing your silk robe, Camilla, the blue one with the embroidered roses that your mother gave you." The room began to spin. Not only was Derek cheating on me, but he'd brought this woman to our sacred place, let her wear my clothes, make herself at home in the space that held our most precious memories. 22 years we'd been together, 15 married, and this is how he repaid my devotion? "There's more," Jasmine continued hesitantly. She mentioned something about them moving in together permanently, said Derek was finally ready to start fresh with her. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. Derek's name flashed on the screen, and with shaking fingers, I opened the message. "Won't be home tonight. Working late on the Riverside project. Don't wait up. D." The lie hit me like a physical blow. For months, Derek had been claiming to work late on various projects, coming home with elaborate stories about difficult clients and demanding deadlines. I'd supported him, brought him coffee during his late nights, worried about his stress levels, all while he was building a life with another woman. I screenshotted his text and sent it to Jasmine, along with the timestamp of her photo. The evidence was undeniable. Derek wasn't working late. He was playing house with his mistress in our cabin, lying to my face with practiced ease. That lying piece of garbage, Jasmine spat. "Camilla, you have to confront him. You can't let him keep playing you like this." But I couldn't move. I sat frozen on our king-sized bed in our Willowbrook Heights home, surrounded by photos of our life together. Our wedding picture on the nightstand, showing Derek gazing at me like he was my entire world. Family vacation photos covering the dresser, documenting years of love and laughter. Had it all been a lie? When had I stopped being enough for him? My phone rang again. This time it was Derek calling, probably realizing his text needed a follow-up to seem convincing. "Hey, beautiful." His voice was warm and familiar, the same tone he'd used to whisper sweet nothings in my ear for over 20 decades. "Just wanted to hear your voice before I dive into this project. It's going to be a long night." "How long?" "Probably won't finish until morning. The client wants everything redesigned from scratch." He sighed dramatically. "I miss you already, though. Can't wait to get home and hold you." Each word was a dagger to my heart. How could he lie so smoothly? How could he speak of missing me while another woman was probably listening from our bed in the cabin? "I miss you too," I whispered, because what else could I say? That I knew exactly where he was and who he was with? That my entire world had just crumbled in the span of a 20-minute phone call?
"Get some sleep, love. I'll make it up to you this weekend. Maybe we could drive up to the cabin. Just the two of us?" The audacity nearly made me laugh. He wanted to take me to the cabin where he'd been entertaining his mistress, probably in the same bed where we'd conceived our daughters. "That sounds perfect," I managed to say. "I love you, Derek. I love you too, Camilla, more than you'll ever know." The line went dead, and I finally allowed myself to break down. Sobs racked my body as 15 years of marriage, 22 years of love, dissolved before my eyes. How many other women had there been? How long had Derek been living this double life while I'd been faithfully raising our daughters, supporting his career, planning our future together? I called my sister Penelope in Ocean View City, barely able to speak through my tears. She listened in stunned silence as I recounted Jasmine's discovery and Derek's lies. "Pack a bag," Penelope said firmly when I finished. "Come stay with me tonight. You shouldn't be alone right now." But I couldn't leave. Not yet. I needed to think, to plan, to figure out what came next. Our daughters were away at college. Hazel studying art therapy at Riverside University, Ruby pursuing marine biology at Coastal State. They didn't need to know about this yet, not until I understood the full scope of Derek's betrayal. As I sat in the darkness of our bedroom, a strange thought occurred to me. Derek had been so casual about taking Scarlett to our cabin, so confident in his deception, but there was something he didn't know, something I'd never bothered to mention because it had never seemed important. The cabin wasn't just our retreat. It was legally mine. My grandmother had left it to me specifically in her will 5 years ago, and I'd never transferred Derek's name onto the deed. At the time, it had seemed like a meaningless technicality. We were married. What was mine was his, right? Wrong. Very, very wrong. A slow smile spread across my tear-stained face as I realized the delicious irony of the situation. Derek thought he could move his mistress into our sacred place, thought he could erase our memories and start fresh with another woman. But Scarlett had no idea she was making herself comfortable in a house that belonged to the wife she was betraying. And neither did Derek. For the first time since Jasmine's call, I felt something other than devastation. I felt power. I felt possibility. And I felt the first stirrings of a plan that would turn Derek's betrayal into his biggest mistake. Tomorrow, I would pay a visit to my lawyer. But tonight, I would let Derek and his mistress enjoy their last evening in my cabin, because very soon, Scarlett was going to get an eviction notice that would change everything. The game was about to begin, and for once, I held all the cards. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I drove to the cabin the next morning, my heart hammering against my ribs as I pulled into the gravel driveway. Derek's silver BMW was still there, parked next to a cherry red convertible I didn't recognize, obviously Scarlett's. The sight of it sitting in my driveway as if she belonged there made my blood boil. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to the familiar stone pathway to the front door. This was my cabin, my sanctuary, and I wasn't going to knock on my own door like some unwelcome visitor. I pulled out my keys and let myself in. The scene that greeted me was like a nightmare come to life. The living room I'd carefully decorated with vintage nautical pieces and family photos had been transformed into some kind of romantic love nest. Rose petals were scattered across the coffee table, expensive champagne bottles set empty on the mantelpiece, and my grandmother's antique quilt, the one she'd hand-stitched for my wedding, was carelessly thrown across the floor. But what made my stomach lurch was the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. Derek's deep chuckle mixed with a woman's high-pitched giggle, the kind of carefree happiness I hadn't heard from him in years. They were cooking breakfast together, playing house in my space like I didn't exist. I walked into the kitchen and froze. Derek stood at the stove flipping pancakes, wearing nothing but boxer shorts and an apron that read, "Kiss the Cook," a gag gift I'd bought him for our 10th anniversary. Scarlett sat perched on my kitchen island wearing one of Derek's dress shirts and nothing else, her long blonde hair tumbling over her shoulders as she fed him strawberries. They were so absorbed in their little domestic fantasy that they didn't notice me standing in the doorway for a full 30 seconds. When Derek finally turned around, the spatula clattered from the floor onto the ground. "Camilla," he said, his face going white as a sheet. What are you doing here?" "In my own cabin?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "I think the better question is what you're doing here, Derek. Weren't you supposed to be working late on the Riverside project?"
Scarlett slid off the counter, suddenly aware of how exposed she was. Up close, she was even prettier than in Jasmine's photo. Probably mid-20s with perfect skin and the kind of figure that came from expensive personal trainers. Everything I'd once been before 15 years of marriage and raising children had softened my edges. "Derek," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you said she never came here anymore. You said she was too busy with work to care about this place." I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the kitchen walls. "Is that what he told you? That I was too busy to care about the cabin my grandmother left me? The place where Derek and I spent our honeymoon?" Scarlett's face crumpled as the reality of the situation hit her. Your grandmother left it to you?" "Oh, sweetheart," I said, my voice dripping with false sympathy. "Did Derek not mention that little detail? This cabin has been in my family for 3 generations. It's mine. Legally, completely, unquestionably mine." Derek finally found his voice, stepping between us like he could somehow salvage this disaster. "Camilla, I can explain." "Explain what? How you've been lying to me for months? How you brought your girlfriend to our sacred place and let her wear my clothes, sleep in our bed, play pretend in my kitchen? Please, Derek, I'm dying to hear this explanation." His jaw clenched, and for a moment I saw a flash of the man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But then his expression hardened into something cold and unfamiliar. "Fine," he said, crossing his arms over his chest. "You want the truth? I've been miserable, Camilla. We both have. We've been going through the motions for years, pretending we're still happy when we both know the spark died long ago." "So your solution was to have an affair," I shot back. "Instead of talking to me, instead of trying to work on our marriage, you decided to sneak around behind my back with someone young enough to be our daughter?" "Don't you dare judge me," Derek's voice rose. "You've been so buried in your work, so focused on your clients and your precious career that you forgot you had a husband. When's the last time we had a real conversation, Camilla? When's the last time you looked at me like you actually wanted me there?" His words hit like physical blows, because there was a grain of truth in them. I had been working more, taking on bigger cases, building my law practice. But I'd done it for us, for our future, for our daughter's college funds. "I worked hard for our family," I said, my voice shaking. "Everything I did was for us." "No," Derek shook his head. "Everything you did was for you, your reputation, your success, your validation. I felt like a stranger in my own home." Scarlett stepped forward then, placing a possessive hand on Derek's arm. "Derek's happy now," she said, her voice gaining confidence. "Happier than he's been in years. We're building something real together, something that actually matters." I stared at this child who had the audacity to lecture me about my own marriage. "How long?" I asked Derek directly. "How long have you been bringing her here?" Derek shifted uncomfortably. 3 months, he admitted. "Ever since you took that big case in Millfield and started traveling more." 3 months. For 3 months, they'd been playing house in my cabin while I'd been working 60-hour weeks to secure our financial future. For 3 months, Derek had been lying to my face while building a life with another woman in the place that held our most precious memories. "And how long have you been together?" I pressed. 6 months. Scarlett answered when Derek hesitated. "We met at the Ocean View Resort during that legal conference you couldn't attend because of work. Derek was there alone, feeling neglected and unappreciated. I was working the event as a coordinator." So, she was an event coordinator, probably impressed by Derek's successful architect facade and his expensive suits. Did she know he still owed $40,000 in student loans? Did she know his last 3 projects had gone over budget? Did she know anything real about him, or just the fantasy version he'd presented? "I see," I said, my voice getting eerily calm again. "And you thought you could just move into my cabin and play house indefinitely. Did it ever occur to either of you that there might be consequences for this little arrangement?" Derek's eyes narrowed. "What kind of consequences?" I smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd felt since discovering their affair. "Well, Derek, since this is my property, and since Scarlett here is essentially a trespasser who's been staying here without my permission, I think it's time she found somewhere else to live." Scarlett's face went white. "You can't just kick me out. Derek invited me here. We're together now."
Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I can do exactly that. This is private property, and you're no longer welcome here. Derek might have thought he could invite you, but Derek doesn't own this place. I do. "You're being ridiculous, Camilla," Derek said, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. "We'll work this out like adults." "Oh, we absolutely will," I agreed, "but Scarlett needs to leave. Now. And Derek, we need to have a very serious conversation about the future of our marriage and exactly what you think you're entitled to." The look of panic that crossed Derek's face told me everything I needed to know. He'd assumed that our shared life meant shared ownership of everything. He'd been counting on the cabin as part of his fresh start with Scarlett. But Derek was about to learn a very hard lesson about assumptions. And Scarlett was about to discover that stealing someone's husband didn't automatically come with stealing their property too. The game was just beginning, and I was already winning. 3 days after the cabin confrontation, I thought I'd hit rock bottom. I was wrong. The real devastation came when I discovered that my own daughters, the 2 people I'd sacrificed everything for, had been conspiring with their father all along. I was sitting in my lawyer's office in downtown Willowbrook Heights, going over the property documents that confirmed my sole ownership of the cabin, when my phone buzzed with a text from Hazel. "Mom, we need to talk. Coming home this weekend." My heart lifted for the first time in days. I desperately needed my girls, needed their support and comfort as my world fell apart. I imagined them wrapping me in their arms, telling me everything would be okay, standing united against Derek's betrayal. I couldn't have been more wrong. Saturday afternoon, I heard familiar voices in the driveway and rushed to the front door, my arms already outstretched for the hugs I desperately needed. But when I opened the door, my daughters weren't alone. Derek stood behind them, his arm casually draped around Ruby's shoulders, that familiar, charming smile playing on his lips. "Girls!" I exclaimed, trying to hide my shock at seeing their father. "I'm so glad you're here. I've missed you both so much." Hazel stepped forward, but instead of embracing me, she crossed her arms over her chest. At 20, she looked exactly like I had at her age. Dark hair, green eyes, determined chin. But the expression on her face was cold, distant, nothing like the warm bother who usually called me 3 times a week. "We know about the cabin, Mom," she said without preamble. "Dad told us everything." "Everything? What exactly did he tell you?" Ruby, my sweet marine biology major, who'd always been my little shadow, stepped up beside her twin sister. "She told us how you've been working all the time, never home, never available for family. He said that you've been neglecting him for years, and that when he finally found someone who made him happy, you tried to kick them out of their home." "Their home?" I stared at my daughters in disbelief. "Ruby,
That cabin belongs to me. It was left to me by my grandmother, your great-grandmother Rose. Derek has no legal claim to it whatsoever." "See?" Derek interjected smoothly, shaking his head with practiced disappointment. "This is exactly what I was talking about, girls. Your mother is so focused on legal technicalities and ownership that she's forgotten what really matters: family, love, happiness." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Derek, you can't be serious. You're twisting this completely around. You're the one who had an affair. You're the one who brought another woman into our sacred place." "Sacred place?" Hazel laughed bitterly. "Mom, when's the last time you even went to that cabin before this week? Dad said you haven't been there in over a year." "That's not true," I protested. But even as I said it, I realized with horror that it might be. Between the Morrison case and the Henderson divorce proceedings, I had been traveling constantly, working weekends, missing family dinners. When had I last suggested a family trip to the cabin? "It is true," Ruby said softly, and the disappointment in her voice broke my heart. "Mom, you missed my marine biology presentation last semester because of work. You missed Hazel's art show opening because you had a deposition. Dad's been the one supporting us, calling us, being there for us." "I was working for you," I said desperately. "For your futures, for your college tuitions, for yourself," Hazel cut me off. "Dad explained everything: how you've become obsessed with your career, how you care more about winning cases than your own family. And now when Dad finally finds someone who actually appreciates him, you want to destroy that too?" I looked at Derek, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. The way he stood slightly behind our daughters, letting them do their dirty work. The small, satisfied smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The way he'd positioned himself as the victim, the devoted father, the neglected husband, finally finding happiness. "He's manipulating you," I said quietly. "Can't you see that? Derek is painting himself as the victim when he's the one who chose to have an affair instead of talking to me about his feelings." "Manipulating?" Ruby's voice rose. "Mom, we're not children anymore. We can see what's happening with our own eyes. Dad's happier than he's been in years. Scarlett is sweet and kind and actually cares about family. She asks about our classes, remembers our friends' names, wants to be part of our lives." "While I've been working 60-hour weeks to pay for those classes," I shot back, my voice cracking with emotion. "Work you chose," Hazel said coldly. "Work you prioritized over us, over Dad, over everything that actually matters, and now you want to punish Dad for finding someone who puts family first." I stared at my daughters, these beautiful, intelligent young women I'd given birth to, nursed through countless illnesses, cheered on at soccer games and science fairs and art exhibitions. How had Derek turned them against me so completely? When had I become the villain in my own family's story? "I spoke to Scarlett yesterday," Ruby continued, delivering what felt like the final blow. "She told me how excited she is to be part of our family, how she's already planning Christmas dinner and family game nights. She wants to create traditions with us, Mom. When's the last time you planned a family anything?" "She's planning Christmas dinner?" I whispered. "In my cabin? With my family?" "It's not just your cabin anymore," Hazel said firmly. "Dad's been paying the utilities, the maintenance, the property taxes for years. Just because your grandmother's name is on some old deed doesn't mean you get to hold it hostage." "That's not how property law works," I started to explain, but Derek held up his hand. "Girls, why don't you give your mother and me a few minutes to talk? This is between adults now." I watched in stunned silence as my daughters obediently filed into the living room, leaving me alone with the man who'd systematically destroyed our family while making me look like the destroyer. "Quite a performance," I said once they were out of earshot. Derek's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing a cold satisfaction that chilled me to the bone. "I didn't have to perform anything, Camilla. I just told them the truth about how absent you've been, how your priorities have shifted, how Scarlett has brought joy back into my life and genuine interest in theirs." "The truth?" I laughed harshly. You told your version of events. Did you mention how you've been stealing money from our joint account to wine and dine your girlfriend? Did you tell them about the 6 months of lies? Did you explain how you brought a stranger into the place where we created our most precious family memories? I told them everything they needed to know, and they've made their choice. They want to spend Christmas at the cabin with Dad and Scarlett. They want to be part of a family that actually spends time together. You've turned my own children against me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You didn't turn them against anything, Derek replied. You did that all by yourself, with your choices, your priorities, your obsession with work over family. I just gave them an alternative, a stepmother who actually wants to be present in their lives. The word stepmother hit me like a physical blow. Stepmother? Derek, we're still married. You can't just... For now, he interrupted. But that's going to change very soon. And when it does, the girls have already told me they want to spend holidays and family time with Scarlett and me. You can have your precious cabin legally, Camilla, but you'll be there alone. As if summoned by his words, my daughters reappeared in the doorway. Hazel's face was set with determination, while Ruby looked sad but resolute. We've decided, Hazel announced. We're going to stay at the cabin this weekend with Dad and Scarlett. We want to get to know her better, to be part of building something positive instead of tearing it down. You're choosing her over me? I asked, my heart shattering with each word. We're choosing happiness over anger, Ruby said quietly. We're choosing to support Dad instead of punishing him for finally finding someone who makes him feel valued. I watched helplessly as my daughters hugged Derek goodbye, as they loaded their bags into his car, as they drove away to spend the weekend with their father and his mistress in my family's cabin. The house felt empty and cold without them, echoing with the ghosts of all the family dinners I'd missed, all the conversations I'd postponed, all the moments I'd sacrificed for the career that was supposed to secure their futures.
Derek had won this round completely. He'd taken not just my husband's loyalty, but my children's love. He'd painted me as the workaholic villain while positioning himself and Scarlett as the loving family unit. And the worst part was, some of his accusations rang true. But as I sat alone in my empty house, a new kind of resolve began to form in my chest. Derek thought he'd broken me by turning my daughters against me. He thought he'd won by making them choose sides. He had no idea that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, because now I had nothing left to lose, and that made me more dangerous than he could possibly imagine. I sat in my car outside the cabin at midnight, watching the warm glow spilling from the windows of what used to be my sanctuary. Through the sheer curtains, I could see silhouettes moving around, Derek, Scarlett, and my daughters, enjoying what looked like the perfect family evening I'd always dreamed of having but never seemed to find time for. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, the legal owner of the property, sitting in the cold darkness like some kind of stalker, while strangers lived my life inside my own home. I'd driven here without really deciding to, after spending 3 days alone in our Willowbrook Heights house, jumping every time the phone rang, hoping it would be Hazel or Ruby calling to apologize, to say they'd realized their mistake. Instead, I'd received a single text from Hazel. Having an amazing time with Dad and Scarlett. She taught us how to make her grandmother's apple pie recipe. The cabin feels like a real home again. The cabin feels like a real home again? As if all our years of family vacations, all our Christmas mornings by the fireplace, all our summers spent fishing off the dock had somehow been lacking? As if Scarlett's presence had magically transformed the space into something it had never been before? My phone buzzed and I grabbed it desperately, hoping against hope it was one of my daughters. Instead, it was Jasmine. Val called me. I'm worried sick. Please call me back. Jasmine, my oldest friend, the one who'd discovered Derek's affair in the first place? I'd been dodging her calls for days because I couldn't bear to admit how completely I'd lost control of my own life. How could I tell her that my husband
hadn't just stolen my marriage, but my children too. I started the car and drove aimlessly through the winding roads around Millbrook Heights, my vision blurred with tears. This was supposed to be Derek's punishment phase, where he faced consequences for his betrayal. Instead, he was living his best life in my cabin with my daughter's blessing, while I fell apart alone. By 2 a.m., I found myself parked outside Jasmine's house in Riverside Gardens. Her porch light was on and I could see her silhouette in the window. She was waiting for me. Before I could even knock, the door swung open and Jasmine pulled me into her arms. That was all it took for the dam to completely burst. I collapsed against her, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. "Oh, honey," she whispered, guiding me to her couch. "What happened? I've been calling for days." Between gasping sobs, I told her everything. Derek's manipulation of the girls, their cold rejection of me, their decision to spend the weekend playing happy family with Scarlett. I watched Jasmine's face go through a range of emotions: shock, anger, disbelief. "Those ungrateful little—" She caught herself. "I'm sorry. I know they're your daughters, but Camilla, this is insane. How can they not see what Derek is doing?" "Because he's right," I said miserably. "I have been absent. I have prioritized work over family. I missed Hazel's art show, Ruby's presentation, countless dinners and conversations. Derek didn't have to lie to them. He just had to tell them the truth about my choices." "Stop it," Jasmine said firmly. "You were working to provide for them, to secure their futures. You were being responsible." "Was I?" I laughed bitterly. Maybe I was hiding behind work because it was easier than dealing with the problems in my marriage. Maybe if I'd paid more attention to Derek, if I'd made more effort to connect with him, none of this would have happened. "Don't you dare blame yourself for his affair," Jasmine snapped. "Derek chose to cheat. Derek chose to lie. Derek chose to manipulate your children instead of having an honest conversation about your marriage. None of that is on you." But the words felt hollow. The truth was, I'd felt the distance growing between Derek and I for years. I'd noticed his increasing irritation when I worked late, his comments about my priorities, his withdrawal from physical intimacy. Instead of addressing it, I'd thrown myself even deeper into work, telling myself I was building our future while Derek was trying to save our present. "I don't know who I am anymore," I whispered. "I'm not a wife. Derek made that clear. I'm apparently not much of a mother either, since my own daughters prefer his mistress to me. I don't even feel like I own my own property anymore. What am I, Jasmine? What's left of me?" Jasmine was quiet for a long moment. Then she grabbed my shoulders and forced me to look at her. "You're Camilla fucking Morrison," she said fiercely. "You're the woman who graduated top of her law class. You're the lawyer who's never lost a property dispute. You're the mother who worked her ass off to give her daughters every opportunity. And you're my best friend who's been through hell before and came out swinging." "This feels different," I said weakly. "This feels like losing everything that actually matters." "Then we get it back," she said simply. "All of it." "How? Derek's turned the girls against me completely. They think Scarlett's some kind of saint, and I'm the evil workaholic who destroyed our family. Even if I kick her out of the cabin, what then? I'll be the bitter ex-wife who ruined her father's happiness." Jasmine was quiet, thinking. Then she pulled out her laptop and started typing. "What's Scarlett's last name?" "I don't know. Why?" "Because, my dear friend, you're thinking like a heartbroken wife instead of like the brilliant lawyer you are. Derek thinks he's won because he's got the girls on his side and he's playing house in your cabin. But he's made some very big assumptions about what he's entitled to." She turned the laptop toward me, showing a social media profile. "Is this her?" I looked at the screen and my heart stopped. It was definitely Scarlett, but not the innocent young woman I'd met at the cabin. These photos showed her at expensive restaurants, designer shopping trips, luxury vacation spots, all clearly funded by money that wasn't hers. "Look at the dates," Jasmine said grimly. "These posts go back 8 months, not 6. Derek's been lying about the timeline."
I scrolled through more photos, my stomach sinking with each image. Scarlett wearing jewelry I recognized from our joint account purchases. Scarlett at the spa Derek claimed was a business meeting location. Scarlett in a dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary, posted on the same day Derek had told me we needed to tighten our budget. "He's been funding her lifestyle with our money for almost a year," I whispered. "That's not even the best part," Jasmine said, clicking to another tab. "Look at this." It was a real estate listing for a luxury condo in downtown Ocean View City listed as recently purchased by Scarlett Hamilton. She bought property? I stared at the screen in disbelief. How could she afford? Then it hit me. Our money. She bought a condo with our marital assets. "Not just any condo," Jasmine said grimly, "a $600,000 condo. And look at the purchase date, 3 months ago, right around the time Derek started claiming he needed access to our emergency fund for business investments." The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Derek hadn't just been having an affair, he'd been systematically draining our accounts to set up a new life with Scarlett. The business investments, the emergency expenses, the cash withdrawals I'd trusted him to handle, it had all been going to fund his girlfriend's lifestyle and secure their future together. "There's more," Jasmine said softly, showing me another screen. "Property records show Derek as a co-signer on the condo mortgage. He used your cabin as collateral for her condo. Camilla." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. He used my cabin as collateral for her condo? How is that even legal? Not if he forged your signature or failed to disclose that you're the sole owner. And based on what I'm seeing here, I don't think the bank properly verified ownership. For the first time in days, I felt something other than despair. I felt anger. Clean, pure, righteous anger that burned away the self-doubt and guilt. "He didn't just steal my husband and turn my children against me," I said slowly. "He committed fraud. He used my property illegally to buy his mistress a home." "Now you're thinking like a lawyer again," Jasmine said with a grim smile. "Derek's been so focused on painting you as the villain that he got sloppy. And Scarlett's been so busy playing princess with your money that she documented everything online." I looked at the evidence spread across the laptop screen. Months of financial fraud, property crimes, and enough documentation to destroy Derek's victim narrative. "My daughters think I'm the monster who's trying to ruin their father's happiness," I said quietly. "They have no idea their father is a criminal." Then I guess it's time they learned the truth. All of it.
As I sat in my best friend's living room at 3 a.m., surrounded by evidence of my husband's systematic betrayal, I felt the last piece of my old self finally break away completely. The woman who'd tried to save her marriage, who'd blamed herself for Derek's choices, who'd accepted her daughter's rejection, she was gone. In her place was someone harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. Someone who understood that Derek had made this a war the moment he decided to steal from me. And if Derek wanted a war, he was going to get one. Monday morning, I walked into the law offices of Sterling and Associates with a briefcase full of evidence and a determination I hadn't felt in years. My reflection in the elevator's polished steel doors showed a woman I barely recognized. Gone was the broken, tearful wife from the weekend. In her place stood someone with steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. Marcus Sterling, one of the city's most ruthless divorce attorneys, looked up from his mahogany desk as his secretary showed me in. I'd never needed his services before, but his reputation for destroying unfaithful spouses was legendary in legal circles. "Mrs. Morrison," he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk, "I understand you have a situation that requires my particular expertise. I have a husband who's been systematically stealing from me for months to fund his affair," I said without preamble, opening my briefcase. "He's committed mortgage fraud using my property as collateral. He's manipulated our children into choosing sides, and he thinks he's going to walk away from our marriage with half of everything I've worked for." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his interest clearly piqued. "And you want to ensure that doesn't happen." "I want to destroy him," I said calmly, "legally, completely, and publicly.
I want him to lose everything, his girlfriend, his reputation, his freedom, if possible. And I want my daughters to see exactly who their father really is. For the next hour, I laid out everything Jasmine and I had discovered. The social media evidence of Scarlett's luxury lifestyle funded by marital assets, the condo purchase with Derek as co-signer using my cabin as collateral without my knowledge or consent, the 8-month timeline that proved Derek had been lying about when the affair started, the systematic draining of our joint accounts disguised as business expenses. Marcus took notes with the precision of a surgeon, occasionally asking clarifying questions that showed he was already formulating a battle plan. "This is better than I expected," he said finally. "Your husband hasn't just committed adultery, he's committed multiple felonies: wire fraud, mortgage fraud, theft of marital assets, potentially tax evasion if he hasn't reported the money transfers properly. Can we get the condo back?" "We can do better than that," Marcus smiled grimly. "We can force a sale and recovery of all assets, plus damages. The mortgage he signed using your property as collateral is void since he had no legal authority to pledge assets he doesn't own. The bank will have to pursue him and his girlfriend for the full amount." "What about my daughters?" He leaned back in his chair. "That's the beauty of this case, Mrs. Morrison. Your daughters think their father is a romantic hero who found love with a sweet young woman. But when the criminal charges are filed, when the bank begins foreclosure proceedings on their dream condo, when the financial records become public during divorce proceedings, well, it becomes much harder to maintain that narrative." I felt the first spark of hope I had experienced in days. "You think we can change their minds?" "I think the truth has a way of speaking for itself," Marcus replied, "especially when that truth involves their college funds being stolen to buy jewelry for their father's girlfriend." The mention of college funds made my blood run cold. "What do you mean?" Marcus consulted his notes. "The education savings accounts you mentioned, the ones you've been contributing to for years, according to these bank statements, there have been significant withdrawals over the past 6 months. Did you authorize those?" I grabbed the papers from him, scanning the numbers with growing horror. The accounts I'd sacrificed so much to build, working extra hours and taking on difficult cases to secure my daughter's futures, they were nearly empty. $50,000, I whispered. He took $50,000 from their college funds to buy his girlfriend a car based on the timing of these withdrawals and her social media posts about her new convertible, Marcus grinned. "Your daughters are currently bonding with the woman who's living a luxury lifestyle funded by their own education money." The rage that swept through me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Derek hadn't just betrayed me, he'd stolen from our children's futures while manipulating them into believing I was the villain. He'd made them complicit in their own financial destruction. "I want him criminally prosecuted," I said, my voice deadly calm. "I want charges filed for theft, fraud, whatever will stick. I want him to face real consequences."
"Criminal prosecution is certainly possible," Marcus agreed. "But I'd recommend we use the threat strategically. File the divorce with full financial disclosure first. Force him to produce records he can't possibly explain. Then, when he's cornered, we present the criminal option as motivation for cooperation." Cooperation? Full asset recovery, admission of guilt, restitution for damages, and most importantly, a statement to your daughters explaining exactly what he's done and why. Sometimes the most devastating punishment isn't prison. It's having to confess your crimes to the people whose respect you wanted most. I thought about my daughters, probably at this very moment sitting in their classes, believing their mother was a cold, career-obsessed woman who couldn't stand their father's happiness. They had no idea they were defending the man who'd stolen their futures to fund his midlife crisis. "How long will this take?" I asked. "Depends how quickly he caves," Marcus said. "Men like your husband are typically cowards when faced with real consequences. He's been getting away with this because he assumed you'd never fight back, never investigate, never call his bluff. The moment he realizes you have evidence of criminal activity, he'll panic. And Scarlett?" Marcus's smile turned predatory. "Miss Hamilton is going to discover that receiving stolen property and participating in mortgage fraud makes her a co-conspirator, not an innocent victim.
Her luxury lifestyle is about to become a very expensive legal liability. I stood up, feeling more powerful than I had in months. When do we start? We already have, Marcus said, reaching for his phone. My investigator is going to verify everything you've shown me and dig for additional evidence. We'll file divorce papers by Friday with full asset disclosure requirements. And Mrs. Morrison. Yes? Your husband picked the wrong woman to underestimate. By the time we're finished, he's going to regret every decision he's made in the past year. That afternoon, I drove to my office for the first time since discovering Derek's affair. My partners and associates welcomed me back with careful concern, having heard rumors about personal troubles. But instead of feeling vulnerable or distracted, I felt more focused than I had in years. I need you to clear my schedule for the next 2 weeks, I told my assistant Rebecca. I have a personal legal matter that requires my full attention. Of course, she said. Is there anything I can help with? I thought about it for a moment. Actually, yes. I need you to research the best private investigator in the city. Someone who specializes in financial crimes and infidelity cases. And I need it done discreetly. I'll have recommendations by tomorrow morning, Rebecca promised. As I sat in my office that evening, reviewing the evidence one more time, my phone rang. Derek's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered ignoring it. Then I remembered Marcus's advice about strategic responses. Hello, Derek. Camilla, thank God. His voice was strained, almost panicked. We need to talk. The girls told me you've been driving by the cabin, and I'm worried about you. This isn't healthy. You're worried about me? I almost laughed. How thoughtful. I know this is hard, but we need to discuss how we're going to handle the divorce. I think we can work something out that's fair to everyone, keep the lawyers out of it, avoid making this ugly. Oh, Derek, I said softly. I'm afraid it's much too late for that. There was a long pause. What do you mean? I mean, I've hired Marcus Sterling. I'm sure you know the name. He's the attorney who took Robert Hendricks for everything in his divorce last year. He's very thorough in his investigations. There was another pause, longer this time. Camilla, there's no need for that kind of aggressive approach. We can handle this civilly. Can we? I asked. Because I've discovered some very interesting financial irregularities that I think require thorough legal examination. I'm sure you can explain everything when you're deposed under oath. Financial irregularities? Derek's voice had gone very quiet. Enjoy your evening with Scarlett, I said sweetly. I hope she's worth it. I hung up my phone and turned it off, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in months. Derek was about to learn that the woman he'd underestimated for years had teeth, very sharp ones. And I was just getting started. By Thursday morning, Marcus's private investigator had uncovered a treasure trove of evidence that made my original discoveries look like the tip of an iceberg. Detective Ray Garrison, a former police investigator who specialized in white-collar crime, sat across from Marcus's conference table with 3 thick folders that would change everything. Your husband is either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant, possibly both. He's left a digital trail that a first-year law student could follow. The evidence was staggering. Derek hadn't just been stealing from our accounts for 8 months, it had been going on for over a year. Credit cards I didn't know existed, taken out in both our names. Business loans for companies that existed only on paper. Investment accounts that had been liquidated and transferred to offshore holdings controlled by Scarlett.
He's moved over $200,000 of marital assets, Rate continued, spreading bank statements across the table. But here's where it gets interesting. Miss Handleton isn't just a passive recipient of stolen funds. She's been actively participating in the scheme. He pulled out a series of documents that made my blood run cold. She incorporated a consulting business 6 months ago, Emerald Coast Events. Guess who's been paying her company substantial fees for services that were never rendered? Derek's architecture firm, I said, the pieces clicking together. Exactly. He's been billing clients for event planning services,
then paying Scarlett's company those fees as legitimate business expenses. Tax deductible, impossible to trace unless you know what to look for, and completely fraudulent since no actual services were provided. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with predatory satisfaction. How much? $87,000 over 6 months, Ray replied. But that's not even the best part. She used that money to secure financing for her condo, claiming it as legitimate business income. The bank has no idea they're holding a mortgage based on fraud proceeds. I felt dizzy as the scope of Derek's betrayal became clear. This wasn't just an affair, or even simple theft. It was an elaborate criminal enterprise designed to systematically drain our marriage of every asset while setting up Derek and Scarlett's new life together. There's more, Ray said, opening the second folder. Your daughter's college funds weren't the only accounts he raided. Your retirement savings, the fund for your mother's care, even the emergency account you set up after your father's heart attack, all of it's gone. The room started spinning. My mother's care fund? The money I'd carefully saved to ensure she could afford the assisted living facility she needed? My father's emergency fund? The safety net I'd built after his cardiac surgery to cover any future medical expenses? Derek had stolen from my parents' security to fund his girlfriend's lifestyle. How much total? I whispered. Near as I can calculate, about $450,000, Ray said grimly. But that's not even the best part. She used that money to secure financing for her condo, claiming it as legitimate business income. The bank has no idea they're holding a mortgage based on fraud proceeds. Near as I can calculate, about $450,000, Ray said grimly. But the criminal liability extends beyond theft. Wire fraud, tax evasion, mortgage fraud, money laundering. We're looking at federal charges if we pursue this fully. Marcus was taking notes rapidly. What about the timeline? Can we prove he was planning this systematically? Ray opened the third folder with a flourish. That's where Derek got really sloppy. He kept detailed records, spreadsheets tracking which accounts he'd accessed, when and how much he moved, even notes about which expenses could be justified if questioned. He also kept copies of Scarlett's business filings, loan applications, everything. He kept records of his own crimes? I asked incredulously. Control freaks always do. He wanted to track every detail of his plan. The irony is, those same records will convict him. Marcus spread the documents across the table, creating a timeline that told the story of Derek's systematic betrayal. It had started small, a few $100s here and there for dinners with Scarlett. Then it escalated to gifts, weekend trips, eventually major purchases like her car and funding for her fake business. The most damning evidence is here, Marcus said, pointing to a series of emails Ray ever recovered from Derek's cloud storage. Love letters between them discussing their financial strategy for building a future together. Derek specifically mentions using your cabin as collateral and jokes about how trusting you are. I read the email excerpt Marcus highlighted. Derek's words burning into my memory. Camilla never checks the detailed statements. She just sees the bottom line. By the time she realizes what's happening, we'll be set up permanently and there won't be much she can do about it. The cabin alone is worth enough to secure our future. He was planning to steal my property from the beginning? I said, my voice hollow with shock. Not just planning, actively working toward it. There are records of him researching property transfer laws, consulting with shady lawyers about asset protection, even getting quotes from real estate agents about selling the cabin. Marcus's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with a grim smile. Speaking of timing, Derek's lawyer just called requesting an emergency meeting. Apparently, your husband is eager to discuss settlement terms. Already? I was surprised by how quickly Derek had panicked. He knows we've hired an investigator, Marcus explained, and he's smart enough to realize that if we're building a case, we're finding things he doesn't want discovered. He's trying to cut a deal before we uncover everything. What kind of a deal? Probably something like 50-50 asset split, joint custody of the children's affections, and a quiet divorce where nobody asks too many questions about where the money went. Standard cheating husband playbook. Admit to the affair, claim midlife crisis, ask for forgiveness and a fresh start. Ray snorted. Except,
We're way past fresh start territory. This isn't a midlife crisis. It's organized financial crime. I thought about my daughters, still at the cabin believing their father was a romantic hero who'd found true love. They had no idea they were supporting a criminal who'd stolen their education funds, their grandparents' security, their mother's retirement.
I want them to know, I said firmly. I want Hazel and Ruby to see exactly what their father is. Not just an adulterer, but a thief who stole from their own futures. That can be arranged, Marcus said. In fact, full disclosure to family members is often part of restitution agreements. Derek will have to explain to his daughters exactly how much of their college money he spent on his girlfriend's jewelry. What about Scarlett? What happens to her when this comes out? Ray's smile was genuinely scary. Miss Hamilton is about to discover that ignorance isn't a defense when you're living in a condo bought with stolen money and running a fake business to launder fraud proceeds. She's looking at criminal charges, asset forfeiture, and bankruptcy when the bank calls in her fraudulent mortgage. Her perfect little life is about to collapse, Marcus added, and when it does, Derek is going to find out how much his young girlfriend really loves him when she's facing prison time for his crimes. I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. Derek had assumed I was too trusting, too busy, too naive to discover his schemes. He'd counted on my love for him and my focus on work to blind me to his systematic theft. Most of all, he'd believed that I would never fight back, never risk the family's reputation by exposing his crimes. He was about to learn how wrong he'd been about all of it. "When do we move?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning," Marcus said. "We filed the divorce petition with full financial disclosure requirements and a motion to freeze all assets pending investigation. We also notify the bank about the fraudulent collateral on Scarlett's mortgage. And if Derek tries to destroy evidence?" Ray held up a USB drive. "Too late. We've already copied everything from his cloud storage, email accounts, and business records. Thanks to modern technology and Derek's complete lack of digital security awareness, we have more evidence than we know what to do with." As I left Marcus's office that afternoon, I felt transformed. The broken, betrayed woman who discovered her husband's affair just days ago was gone. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Someone who understood exactly how to use the law as a weapon. Derek thought he'd been clever, stealing from me while manipulating our daughters into believing I was the problem. He'd counted on my love for him and my focus on work to blind me to his systematic theft. Most of all, he'd believed that I would never fight back, never risk the family's reputation by exposing his crimes. He was about to learn how wrong he'd been about all of it. Friday morning at exactly 9 a.m., Marcus's process server knocked on the cabin door. I watched from my car parked down the road as Derek answered, still in his pajamas, coffee mug in hand. The look of confusion on his face quickly transformed to horror as he read the papers. Divorce petition, asset freeze order, demand for complete financial disclosure, and notice of investigation for potential criminal charges. Through the window, I could see Scarlett appear behind him, her perfect morning routine interrupted by the reality of what she'd gotten herself into. Derek's face went white as he continued reading, his hands visibly shaking by the time he reached the section detailing the evidence against him. My phone rang immediately. Derek's panicked voice filled my car. "Camilla, what the hell is this? Asset freeze? Criminal investigation? You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," I replied calmly. "You have 72 hours to produce documentation for every financial transaction over the past 18 months. Bank records, business expenses, transfers, everything." "This is insane. You're destroying our family over a mistake." "A mistake?" I cut him off. "Derek, you stole $450,000 from our marriage. You created fake businesses to launder money. You used my property as collateral for fraud. That's not a mistake. That's organized crime." "I never meant for it to go this far," he said, and I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. "Camilla, please, let's just meet and talk about this like adults. Bring your lawyer if you want, but we can resolve this without destroying both our lives."
Both our lives? I felt the familiar cold anger rising. "Derek, you destroyed our lives the moment you started stealing from us. I'm just making sure there are consequences." After hanging up, I drove straight to the bank.
where Derek had used my cabin as collateral for Scarlett's mortgage. The bank manager, Patricia Wells, was expecting me thanks to Marcus's advance call. "Mrs. Morrison," she said gravely, "I want to assure you that if our bank processed a mortgage using your property as collateral without your knowledge, we take that extremely seriously." "According to my attorney, that's exactly what happened," I replied, handing her copies of the property deed and the mortgage documents Ray had uncovered. "My husband had no legal authority to pledge my property for anyone's loan." Patricia examined the documents, her frown deepening with each page. "I see the problem immediately. The signature on the collateral agreement doesn't match your signature on file, and there's no notarized consent from you as the sole property owner." "What does that mean for the mortgage?" "It means the collateral agreement is void, which makes the entire mortgage fraudulent. We'll have to immediately demand full payment of the loan amount from the borrowers." She looked up at me with professional sympathy. "I am afraid Miss Hamilton and Mr. Morrison are going to receive some very unpleasant news today." "How unpleasant?" "They have 30 days to pay the full $600,000 loan amount, or we begin foreclosure proceedings. Given that the loan was secured under false pretenses, there's also the matter of potential criminal charges for mortgage fraud." I felt a surge of satisfaction. "When will they be notified?" "Today by certified mail and personal service. We don't waste time with fraudulent mortgages." From the bank, I drove to my parents' house in Millbrook Gardens. I needed to tell them what Derek had done before they heard it through legal channels, or worse, from the newspapers when the criminal charges became public. My mother answered the door, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Camilla, what a wonderful surprise! Your father's in the garden. He'll be so happy to see you." I sat them down in their cozy living room, surrounded by photos of family gatherings and grandchildren's artwork. The conversation I was about to have would shatter their image of Derek, the son-in-law they'd welcomed and trusted for over 15 years. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something about Derek and our marriage. We're getting divorced." My mother's face fell. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. What happened?" "He's been having an affair," I said, watching their expressions shift from concern to shock. "But that's not the worst part. He's also been stealing money from our accounts, including the money I set aside for your care and Dad's medical expenses." My father's face went very still. At 78, he'd seen enough of life to understand the implications immediately. "How much, Camilla?" "All of it, Dad. The entire medical fund, Mom's assisted living savings, everything. About $60,000 total." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "60,000? But that was our security, our backup plan if something happened." "I know, Mom. And I promise you I'm going to get every penny back. Derek is going to face criminal charges for what he's done." My father stood up slowly, his face hard with anger I'd rarely seen from my gentle father. "That bastard stole from his own family's security, from money meant to take care of his wife's parents?" "It gets worse," I said quietly. "He also stole from Hazel and Ruby's college funds, $50,000, that was supposed to secure their futures." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice trembling with rage. "Those poor girls. Do they know?" "Not yet. They're currently staying at the cabin with Derek and his girlfriend, believing he's some kind of romantic hero. They think I'm the villain trying to ruin his happiness." When they find out the truth, my father shook his head. "This is going to devastate them." "Yes, it is," I agreed. "But they deserve to know who their father really is. They need to understand that the woman they're defending bought her lifestyle with their education money." My mother reached for my hand. "What can we do to help?" "Just be ready to support the girls when this all comes out. They're going to need their grandparents when they realize how thoroughly their father has betrayed all of us."
As I drove home that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. Check Scarlett's social media now. I pulled over and opened Scarlett's Instagram account. Her latest post from just an hour ago showed her lounging by the cabin's lakefront dock with the caption, "Living my best life in paradise with my amazing man and our beautiful girls. Some people are just jealous of happiness. #blessed, #new family, #living the dream."
The comments section was a war zone. Jasmine had apparently been busy, sharing screenshots of bank records and property documents. "Your paradise is bought with stolen money," she'd written. "Hope you saved receipts because the FBI is coming." Other friends and family members had joined in, each comment more damning than the last. "You destroyed a family and stole from children's college funds. Enjoy your last days in that cabin. The real owner is taking it back. How does it feel to be a criminal?" Scarlett had tried to delete the comments, but they kept coming faster than she could remove them. Her perfect social media image was crumbling in real time. Then I saw the most devastating comment of all, posted just minutes ago by someone with the username @EmmaM2024. Wait, is this true? Did Dad really steal our college money? My heart stopped. Ruby had seen the posts. My daughter was learning about her father's crimes through a social media war. My phone rang immediately. Ruby's number. "Mom?" Her voice was small, confused, younger than her 20 years. "Mom, what's happening? People are saying Dad stole money from us, that Scarlett's living in our cabin illegally. Is any of this true?" "Where are you right now, sweetheart?" "At the cabin. Derek and Scarlett are inside fighting about something, and I came out here to get away from the shouting. Hazel's locked herself in the bedroom. Mom, I'm scared. What's going on?" "Ruby, I need you to listen carefully," I said, my heart breaking for my daughter. "Yes, it's true. Your father has been stealing from our family for over a year. The money for your college, for your grandparents' care, for our future. He took it all to buy Scarlett gifts and fund their lifestyle." "No!" she whispered. "No, that can't be true. Dad wouldn't do that to us." "I have all the evidence, baby. Bank records, email conversations, everything. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." Through the phone, I could hear shouting from inside the cabin growing louder. Then I heard Hazel's voice, angry and accusatory. "Did you steal our college money? Did you really do that?" The counterattack had begun, and Derek's perfect little world was about to implode completely. I arrived at the cabin 20 minutes after Ruby's call to find absolute chaos. Derek's BMW was parked haphazardly in the driveway, and through the windows I could see him pacing frantically while Scarlett sat hunched over her laptop, frantically deleting social media comments that kept appearing faster than she could remove them. Before I could even get out of my car, the front door burst open and Hazel stormed out, her face streaked with tears and twisted with rage. She marched straight to my car window. "Is it true? Did Dad really steal our college money to buy her things?" I got out of the car and pulled my daughter into my arms, feeling her trembling with anger and betrayal. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." $50,000? He stole $50,000 from our futures? "More than that, sweetheart. He also took money from your grandparents' medical fund, our retirement savings, almost everything we had." Ruby appeared in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. She walked slowly toward us, her phone clutched in her hand. "I've been reading the comments," she said numbly. "People are posting bank records, pictures of Scarlett's purchases, everything. That car she's so proud of, it was bought with our college money." "Ruby, and the jewelry?" she continued, her voice getting stronger with each word. "All those expensive necklaces and bracelets she keeps posting pictures of, our education fund paid for those." The front door slammed open again, and Derek emerged, his face flushed with desperation. "Girls, don't listen to this nonsense. Your mother's lawyers are twisting everything, making it sound worse than it is." "Worse than it is?" Hazel spun around to face her father, her green eyes blazing with fury. "Dad, you stole from us! You literally stole money that was meant for our futures and gave it to your girlfriend!" "It's not that simple," Derek protested, but his voice lacked conviction.
The business was struggling. I needed to make some temporary transfers. Temporary? Ruby's voice cracked. Dad, Scarlett bought a $600,000 condo with our money. How is that temporary? You bought her a condo? Hazel stared at her father in disbelief. With our college funds? Derek's composure finally cracked completely. You don't understand the pressure I was under, the stress of keeping everyone happy, maintaining our lifestyle while the business was failing. So you decided to steal from your own children? I said quietly, stepping forward. Instead of talking to me about financial problems, instead of asking for help, you chose to systematically drain our accounts to fund an affair.
Don't you dare lecture me about choices, Derek snapped, his desperation turning to anger. You were never here, Camilla. You were always working, always putting your career first. I was drowning, and you didn't even notice. So you decided to drag all of us down with you? Hazel shot back. Dad, even if Mom was working too much, that doesn't justify stealing from your own family. Scarlett finally appeared in the doorway, her perfect makeup smeared with tears. Derek, what's happening? The bank called about the mortgage, and people online are saying we committed crimes. We? Ruby turned to look at Scarlett with undisguised contempt. There's no we here. You're just the person who received our stolen money. I didn't know, Scarlett protested weakly. Derek told me the money was from his business profits. Bullshit, Hazel said bluntly. You had to know something was wrong. Nobody makes that much money planning events in this town. I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots Ray had compiled. Actually, let me clear up any confusion about what everyone knew. I showed them the email chain between Derek and Scarlett discussing their financial strategy, including Derek's joke about how trusting I was, and Scarlett's response suggesting they maximized the window before I discovered anything. Maximize the window? Ruby read the text aloud, her voice getting colder with each word. You knew exactly what you were doing. Scarlett's face went white. Those emails are taken out of context. What context makes stealing from children acceptable? Hazel demanded. Derek stepped between us, his face desperate. This is all getting blown out of proportion. Yes, I made some mistakes, but we can fix this. Camilla, if you drop the legal action, I'll pay everything back. With what money? I asked calmly. According to the bank, you're about to lose Scarlett's condo because the mortgage was fraudulent. You've liquidated all our investments. Your business accounts are frozen pending investigation. What exactly are you going to pay me back with? The business will recover. The business that doesn't exist? I pulled out another document Ray had compiled. Derek, we know about Emerald Coast events. We know Scarlett's consulting business was just a shell company to launder stolen money. When the IRS finishes their investigation, you'll owe back taxes on unreported income plus penalties. Scarlett sank down onto the porch steps, the reality of her situation finally hitting her. Derek, you said this was all legal. You said the consulting payments were legitimate business expenses. They were... No, they weren't, I cut him off. Scarlett, you've been living off money stolen from children's education funds while pretending to be their friend. How does that feel? I never pretended anything, Scarlett said weakly, but even she didn't sound convinced. Ruby walked over to stand directly in front of Scarlett. You taught us to make apple pie last weekend. You talked about planning our Christmas traditions. The whole time, you were wearing jewelry bought with our college money. Ruby, I didn't... You know what the worst part is? Hazel joined her sister, both girls standing over the woman who'd helped destroy their family. We actually liked you. We thought you made Dad happy. We defended you to Mom. You can still... No, Ruby said firmly. We can't. Because everything about you is a lie. Your car, your clothes, your condo, even your fake business. It's all built on money stolen from our family. Derek tried one last desperate play. Girls, I know this looks bad, but Scarlett and I love each other. What we have is real, even if I made some mistakes in how I handled the finances. Love? Hazel laughed bitterly. Dad, she's about to lose everything because of your love.
Let's see how real it is when she's facing criminal charges." As if summoned by her words, 2 cars pulled into the driveway. The first was a police cruiser, the second an unmarked sedan. Detective Garrison got out of the sedan, followed by 2 federal agents in dark suits. "Derek Morrison?" one of the agents called out. "Yes, I'm Agent Martinez, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We have a warrant to search these premises and seize any evidence related to wire fraud, money laundering, and theft of marital assets." "FBI?" Scarlett whispered, stumbling to her feet. "Derek, you said this was just a civil divorce matter." "It was," Derek said numbly, watching as more agents emerged from a third car that had just arrived. "Camilla, you called the FBI on your own husband?" "I reported crimes to the appropriate authorities," I said calmly. "What happens next depends on what they find." Agent Martinez approached Scarlett with a second warrant. "Scarlett Hamilton, we also have a warrant for the search of your condominium and business premises." "My condo?" Scarlett's voice was barely audible. "But I haven't done anything wrong." "Ma'am, receiving proceeds from wire fraud and participating in money laundering are federal crimes. You'll need to come with us for questioning."
As the federal agents began photographing and cataloging evidence, my daughters stood beside me, watching their father's world collapse in real time. The man they'd defended just days ago was being treated as a criminal, while the woman they'd embraced as a new family member was being read her rights. "Mom," Ruby said quietly, "I'm sorry we didn't believe you." "I'm sorry too," Hazel added, her voice thick with tears. "We should have known you'd never lie about something this serious." I pulled both my daughters close, feeling them truly in my arms for the first time since this nightmare began. "You don't need to apologize, girls. Your father manipulated all of us." As Derek and Scarlett were led away in handcuffs, their perfect love story ending in federal custody, I realized that this was only the beginning. The legal battles would be long and complicated, the family healing would take time, and the financial recovery might take years. But for the first time since discovering Derek's betrayal, I had my daughters back. And as we stood together watching the agents secure evidence of crimes that would put Derek and Scarlett in prison, I knew we would rebuild our lives stronger than before. The major showdown was over, and the truth had finally won. 3 months later, I sat in the federal courthouse in downtown Willowbrook Heights, watching as Judge Catherine Reynolds reviewed the mountain of evidence that would determine Derek and Scarlett's fate. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and legal professionals who'd been following what the media had dubbed the cabin caper case. Hazel and Ruby sat beside me in the front row, their hands intertwined with mine as we waited for the judge's ruling on the criminal charges. Behind us, my parents sat with Jasmine and several other family friends who'd supported us through the nightmare. On the other side of the courtroom, Derek and Scarlett sat with their respective attorneys, both looking like shadows of their former selves. Derek had lost weight, his expensive suits hanging loose on his frame. The confident, charming man who'd once commanded every room he entered now looked defeated and hollow. Scarlett appeared even worse. Her perfectly styled hair was now a simple ponytail, her designer wardrobe replaced with a conservative gray dress that did nothing to hide how much she'd aged in just 3 months. In the matter of United States versus Derek Morrison and Scarlett Hamilton, Judge Reynolds began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "This court has reviewed extensive evidence of systematic financial fraud spanning over 18 months. She lifted the first folder from her desk. "The evidence shows that Mr. Morrison unlawfully transferred $453,000 from marital accounts, retirement funds, and educational savings to finance an extramarital affair and establish illegal business entities." Derek's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. They'd tried to negotiate a plea deal, but Marcus had advised me to reject any arrangement that didn't include full restitution and significant prison time. "Miss Hamilton," the judge continued, turning to Scarlett, "created a fraudulent consulting business that existed solely to launder stolen funds. She used proceeds from these crimes to purchase luxury items, secure fraudulent mortgages, and maintain a lifestyle far beyond any legitimate means." Scarlett's attorney whispered something in her ear, but she stared straight ahead, her face blank with shock.
The court finds the evidence of conspiracy overwhelming, Judge Reynolds said, her voice growing stern. Text messages between the defendants show clear awareness that they were spending money that didn't belong to them, including specific discussions about maximizing the window before discovery. She opened the second folder. Most disturbing to this court is the theft from educational savings accounts belonging to minor children and medical care funds designated for elderly family members. These crimes didn't just steal money, they stole security, future opportunities, and peace of mind from innocent victims. Ruby squeezed my hand tighter as the judge continued. Mr. Morrison, you have been found guilty on all counts: wire fraud, money laundering, theft of marital assets, and mortgage fraud. Ms. Hamilton, you have been found guilty of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and receiving stolen property. The courtroom was dead silent as Judge Reynolds prepared to announce the sentences. Mr. Morrison, this court sentences you to 7 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You are ordered to pay full restitution of $453,000 plus interest and penalties, totaling $612,000. Derek's face crumpled, and I heard what sounded like a sob escape from his side of the courtroom. Ms. Hamilton, you are sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, followed back 2 years of supervised probation. You are jointly responsible for the restitution amount, and all assets acquired through criminal proceeds will be forfeit to the court. Scarlett finally broke, tears streaming down her face as the reality of her situation hit home. 4 years in prison, bankruptcy, and a criminal record that would follow her for life. Additionally, Judge Reynolds said, both defendants are permanently barred from any business involving financial services, real estate transactions, or investment advice. All professional licenses are hereby revoked.
Marcus leaned over to whisper in my ear, Derek's architecture license is gone. He'll never work in his field again. But the judge wasn't finished. This court also orders the immediate transfer of all fraudulently obtained assets to the victims. Miss Hamilton's condominium will be sold at auction, with proceeds going directly to restitution. Mr. Morrison's business assets, including all equipment and client contracts, are forfeit. She fixed both defendants with a steely stare. Let me be clear, this was not a crime of passion or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a calculated, systematic theft spanning over a year, targeting the most vulnerable members of your own family. The betrayal of trust involved here is staggering. Derek's attorney stood up. Your Honor, my client would like to make a statement. No, Judge Reynolds cut him off. Mr. Morrison had every opportunity to confess his crimes and cooperate with investigators. Instead, he continued lying even after arrest, attempting to manipulate his children and ex-wife into dropping charges. This court has heard enough from Mr. Morrison. As the judge's gavel fell with finality, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I'd been carrying for months. Derek would spend the next 7 years in federal prison, unable to manipulate anyone or steal from any other families. Scarlett's dream life was officially over, her condo would be sold to pay restitution, and both of them would emerge from prison as convicted felons with no assets and no prospects. After the sentencing, we gathered outside the courthouse steps where a crowd of reporters waited. Marcus had prepared a brief statement, but I decided to speak from the heart. Today, justice was served, I said, my voice steady and clear. But this case isn't really about revenge or punishment. It's about accountability. Derek Morrison and Scarlett Hamilton stole not just money, but security and trust from an entire family. A reporter called out, Mrs. Morrison, how do you feel about your ex-husband's sentence? 7 years seems appropriate for someone who spent over a year systematically stealing from his own children's futures. Derek had countless opportunities to address our marital problems honestly. Instead, he chose crime. What about Miss Hamilton's role? Scarlett Hamilton wasn't an innocent victim who got swept up in romance. She was an active participant who helped create fake businesses to launder stolen money. She knew exactly where her luxury lifestyle was coming from. Another reporter shouted, "Will you be able to recover the stolen funds?" Marcus stepped forward to answer. The court has ordered full restitution plus penalties. Between the asset forfeitures and the sale of fraudulently purchased property, Mrs. Morrison will recover approximately 90% of the stolen funds plus damages. What's next for your family? I looked at Hazel and Ruby, who stood proudly beside me despite the circus atmosphere. My daughters and I are going to rebuild. We're going to restore the college funds Derek stole, secure my parents' medical care funding, and move forward stronger than ever. Any regrets about pursuing criminal charges? None whatsoever, I said without hesitation. Derek and Scarlett committed serious crimes that affected multiple generations of our family. They needed to face real consequences, not just a slap on the wrist. As we walked away from the courthouse, Hazel linked her arm through mine. Mom, I'm proud of you. A weaker person would have just taken half the assets and moved on. Your father was counting on me being weak. He assumed I'd be too hurt, too embarrassed, or too scared to fight back. He was wrong about it all. Ruby smiled grimly. I still can't believe Scarlett thought she could get away with spending our college money on designer handbags. She probably thought she was untouchable. Young, pretty, in love with a successful older man who showered her with stolen money. She never imagined it would all come crashing down. That evening, we returned to the cabin for the first time since Derek's arrest. The federal agents had finished processing it as a crime scene, and it was officially mine again. As we walked through the rooms that had been defiled by Derek and Scarlett's presence, I felt not sadness, but determination.
We're going to redecorate, I announced. New furniture, new paint, new everything. This place is going to be ours again. Can we burn that couch? Hazel asked, pointing to the leather sofa where Derek and Scarlett had posed for so many social media photos. Absolutely, I laughed. In fact, let's make it a bonfire. We'll roast marshmallows and celebrate our fresh start. As we sat on the dock that night, watching the flames consume the furniture that represented Derek's betrayal, I realized that the victory in court was just the beginning. We had money to recover, relationships to rebuild, and a future to create. But for the first time in over a year, that future felt bright and full of possibilities. 6 months after Derek and Scarlett began serving their federal sentences, I received a call from Detective Garrison that would provide the final chapter to their spectacular downfall. He asked me to meet him at a coffee shop in downtown Ocean View City, his voice carrying a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal vindication. "You're going to want to see this," Ray said, sliding a thick manila folder across the table. Scarlett's condo went up for auction last week as part of the asset forfeiture. The buyer's inspection turned up some very interesting discoveries. I opened the folder to find photographs that made my stomach turn. Hidden throughout the luxury condo were designer items with the tags still on. Thousands of dollars worth of clothes, jewelry, and accessories that Scarlett had never even worn. The walk-in closet looked like a high-end boutique, with items organized by color and designer label. "She was hoarding," Ray explained. "Shopping addiction, funded by your family's money." The psychological evaluation from her sentencing hearing suggested she had a compulsive spending disorder. But seeing it like this, he shook his head. "She spent your daughter's college fund on clothes she never even touched." But that wasn't the most shocking discovery. In Scarlett's home office, investigators had found detailed spreadsheets tracking every purchase, every transfer, every lie she told Derek about where the money went. "She kept records of everything," Ray continued, pointing to printed bank statements covered in her handwriting. "Look at these notations. Derek birthday gift, $3,200. Spa day while D thinks I'm working, $800. New jewelry for cabin photos, $1,500. The level of calculation was breathtaking. Every manipulation, every fake expense, every stolen dollar had been carefully documented by the woman who'd pretended to be in love. "There's more," Ray said grimly. "We found correspondence with other men, dating app conversations, email exchanges, even a few that suggest she was planning to leave Derek once she'd maximized what she could steal from him. In one particularly damning exchange, she'd written, 'The old husband is completely clueless. I've got maybe 6 more months before even he notices the missing money. By then, I'll have enough saved to disappear.' She was planning to abandon him?
I asked, though the evidence was right in front of me. Not just abandon him. She was going to frame him for everything and disappear with whatever cash she could liquidate, Ray explained. We found plane tickets to Costa Rica in a fake name and a bank account in the Cayman Islands that we're still trying to trace. The woman Derek had destroyed his family for, the woman he believed loved him enough to build a future with, had been planning to betray him from the very beginning. She'd seen him nothing more than a mark, a lonely, middle-aged man with access to family money and no idea how thoroughly he was being manipulated. "Has Derek seen any of this?" I asked. Ray shook his head. "Prison regulations limit what information we can share during ongoing investigations, but his lawyers will receive copies as part of the discovery process for the civil restitution case." "What about the other men she was talking to?" "That's where it gets really interesting," Ray said, his expression darkening. "Scarlett Hamilton wasn't even her real name. Her birth name is Sarah Kellerman, and she has a criminal history in 3 other states. Identity theft, fraud, seduction schemes targeting older men with assets. Derek wasn't her first victim. He was her 4th that we know of." I stared at the rap sheet Ray handed me. Sarah Kellerman, age 26, had been running sophisticated romantic cons since she was 21. She'd stolen over $500,000 from various victims across the country, always targeting married men going through midlife crises, always using the same playbook of fake businesses and luxury lifestyle manipulation. Derek thought he was having an affair with a sweet young event coordinator, but he was actually being conned by a professional criminal.
A very good one, Ray agreed. Look at this timeline. She researched your family for months before making contact with Derek. She knew about his business struggles, your work schedule, even your daughter's college plans. This wasn't a chance meeting. It was a targeted operation. The file contained screenshots of social media surveillance, property record searches, even credit reports that Scarlett had illegally obtained about our family. She'd studied us like prey, learning our vulnerabilities and weaknesses before moving in for the kill. She knew exactly what buttons to push, I realized. She knew Derek felt neglected, so she became the attentive girlfriend. She knew he was insecure about his business, so she offered to help him invest in their future. She played him perfectly. And she documented it all, Ray said, pointing to what looked like a con artist's playbook. Step-by-step instructions for manipulating married men, complete with psychological profiles and financial targets. She even had backup plans for what to do if wives became suspicious. The backup plans were chilling. If I had discovered the affair earlier, Scarlett was prepared to claim Derek had been sexually harassing her at work. If I'd found evidence of financial theft, she was ready to frame Derek as an abusive husband who was threatening her into silence. Every possible scenario had been planned for, except the one where I fought back with professional legal help. "Where's she now?" I asked. "Federal Women's Prison in Millfield. And here's the beautiful part. The other victims have come forward. She's facing additional charges in Tennessee, Florida, and California. Her 4-year sentence just became a potential 20-year sentence. 20 years? Pattern of criminal behavior across state lines makes it a federal racketeering case," Ray explained with satisfaction. "Sarah Kellerman's career as a professional con artist is officially over." But perhaps the most devastating revelation was still to come. Ray opened the final section of the file to reveal financial records showing that Scarlett had been simultaneously running cons on 2 other men while she was with Derek. She was stealing from 3 families at the same time. Derek's money was funding her lifestyle while she was working this same scheme on a doctor in Miami and a businessman in Nashville. She had spreadsheets tracking which man was paying for what. I thought about Derek, sitting in his federal prison cell, probably still believing that his only mistake was loving the wrong woman. He had no idea that the woman he'd destroyed his family for had never loved him at all. She'd seen him as nothing more than a bank account with legs. The Miami doctor lost his house. The Nashville businessman's wife filed for divorce and took the kids across the country. Scarlett destroyed 3 families simultaneously, and she documented every dollar she stole from each one.
Has anyone told Derek about the other victims? I asked. Not yet, Ray replied. But when the additional charges are filed, it'll all become public record. He's going to learn that his great love affair was actually just another Tuesday for a professional criminal. That evening, I showed the files to Hazel and Ruby. My daughters, now 21 and stronger than ever, read through the evidence with a mixture of disgust and vindication. She was planning to frame Dad and disappear, Ruby said. Even after everything he did for her, she was going to destroy him too. It makes me feel sick, but also, I don't know, relieved. Like, Dad wasn't just stupid and selfish. He was actually the victim of a professional criminal. Does that change how you feel about him? I asked carefully. Both girls were quiet for a moment. Finally, Ruby spoke. It doesn't excuse what he did to us. He still chose to steal from our college funds. He still chose to betray you and manipulate us. But knowing that he was being manipulated too, it makes him seem more pathetic than evil. I agree, Hazel said. Scarlett, or Sarah, or whatever her real name is, she's the monster. Dad was just weak and stupid enough to let her use him. As I tucked the files away that night, I realized that Derek and Scarlett's downfall was even more complete than I had imagined. Derek would spend years in prison knowing that the woman he'd sacrificed everything for had never cared about him at all. She'd seen him as nothing more than a bank account with legs. They both got exactly what they deserved, in ways neither of them had ever seen coming. 2 years after Derek began serving his sentence, I received a letter that would test everything I thought I knew about forgiveness and family healing. The envelope bore the stamp of Federal Correctional Institution Millfield, and Derek's familiar handwriting on the address label made my stomach tighten with unexpected emotion. I stared at the unopened envelope for 3 days before finally reading it on a quiet Sunday morning at the cabin. Hazel and Ruby were both home from college for spring break, and we'd been having the kind of peaceful family weekend that had once seemed impossible. Mom, you don't have to read it if you're not ready, Ruby said gently, noticing me turning the envelope over in my hands for the 100th time. I think I am ready, I said, though my voice shook slightly. We've all done so much healing over the past 2 years. Maybe it's time to hear what he has to say. I opened the letter carefully, my eyes scanning Derek's changed handwriting. Smaller, more hesitant than the confident script I remembered. Camilla, I know I have no right to write to you, and I understand if you throw this letter away without reading it. I've written and torn up dozens of letters over the past year, trying to find words that could somehow express what I need to say. I know about Sarah Kellerman. I know about the other families she destroyed, the other men she conned, the fact that everything I thought was real was just another criminal operation. My lawyer showed me the files 6 months ago, and I haven't slept properly since. I want you to know that learning the truth doesn't excuse what I did. Even if Sarah manipulated me, even if she was a professional criminal, I still made the choice to steal from our family. I still chose to betray you and lie to our daughters. Those were my decisions, and I take full responsibility for them. But I also need you to understand something. When I was stealing money and lying to everyone, I genuinely believed I was building a future with someone who loved me. I thought I was investing in a new life, not funding a criminal operation. The man who made those choices was broken, lonely, and desperate for validation. But he wasn't intentionally cruel. He was just incredibly, unforgivably stupid. I've had 2 years to think about what I destroyed, and I understand now that my problems in our marriage were my responsibility to address honestly. Instead of talking to you about feeling neglected, instead of seeking counseling or finding healthy ways to reconnect, I let Sarah exploit my weaknesses and turn them into weapons against our family. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking you to visit or even respond to this letter.
But our daughters have been writing to me, and I can see how much they've grown and how proud they are of the woman you've become. I wanted you to know that I'm proud of you too. You fought for our family in ways I never could have, and you protected our girls when I failed them completely. If there's any way to make amends beyond the court-ordered restitution, please let me know. I have nothing left to give except honesty and the promise that I will never hurt our family again. With respect and deep regret, Derek. I read the letter 3 times before setting it down, surprised by the complexity of emotions it stirred up. There was anger, yes, but also something I hadn't expected. A kind of sad relief that the man I'd once loved was still capable of taking responsibility for his actions. "What did he say?" Hazel asked gently. I handed her the letter, watching as she and Ruby read it together. Their faces showed the same conflicted emotions I was feeling. Hurt, disappointment, but also a grudging recognition that their father sounded genuinely remorseful. "He sounds different," Ruby said finally. "Less arrogant, I guess." "Prison changes people," I replied. "Some get harder, some get broken, and some finally learn to see themselves clearly." "Are you going to write back?" Hazel asked. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to tell him exactly how much damage he caused, but another part of me thinks, what would be the point? He's already paying for what he did. That afternoon, my parents came to the cabin for Sunday dinner, a tradition we'd reestablished after Derek's conviction. Over the past 2 years, they'd been instrumental in helping the girls process their complicated feelings about their father. "Derek wrote to me," I told them as we cleared the dinner dishes. My father paused, his expression thoughtful. "What did he have to say?" I summarized the letter's contents, watching my parents' faces as they processed Derek's words. "You know," my mother said slowly, "I've been thinking a lot about Derek lately. Not defending him," she added quickly, "but trying to understand how the young man who used to help me in the garden became someone capable of such betrayal." "What do you mean, Grandma?" Ruby asked. "I think Derek lost himself somewhere along the way. The Derek who married your mother was kind, hardworking, genuinely caring. The Derek who stole from our family was someone else. Someone broken and desperate for validation. But he wasn't intentionally cruel. He was just incredibly, unforgivably stupid." My father nodded. "That doesn't excuse what he did, but it might explain it. And if he's truly taking responsibility now, maybe that means the person we once cared about is still in there somewhere." "So, you think Mom should forgive him?" Hazel asked. "I think your mother should do whatever feels right for her. Forgiveness isn't about Derek. It's about Camilla's peace of mind." That evening, after my parents left and the girls went to bed, I sat alone on the dock where Derek and I had once planned our future together. Jasmine called just as I was starting to feel overwhelmed by the weight of decision.
"I heard Derek wrote to you," she said without preamble. "How are you holding up?" "I'm confused," I admitted. "For 2 years, I've been so angry at him, so focused on justice and recovery, but reading his letter, I don't know, Jazz. He sounds genuinely broken by what he's learned about Sarah." "Good," Jasmine said firmly. "He should be broken. He destroyed his family for a woman who was planning to destroy him, too. But what if learning the truth actually helps him become a better person? What if prison is genuinely rehabilitating him instead of just punishing him?" Jasmine was quiet for a moment. "Camilla, you've spent the last 2 years rebuilding your life and healing your family. Derek's rehabilitation isn't your responsibility."
I know that. But the girls have been writing to him, and they're starting to see him as someone who made terrible choices rather than someone who's inherently evil. Maybe there's a difference. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about writing back, I said slowly. Not to reconcile, not to rebuild anything, but to close this chapter properly. The girls need to see that it's possible to acknowledge someone's humanity while still holding them accountable for their actions. 3 days later, I sat down to write my response. Derek, I received your letter and appreciate your honesty about Sarah Kellerman and your own choices. You're right that being manipulated doesn't excuse the theft and betrayal, and I'm glad you understand that. I want you to know that our daughters are thriving. They're both excelling in college, they've rebuilt their relationship with their grandparents, and they've yearned to trust again. The money you stole has been recovered, and we've created new security for our family's future. I'm writing back not because I've forgiven you, but because Hazel and Ruby need to see that it's possible to respond to genuine remorse with basic human decency. They're still your daughters, and they deserve to have a father who's committed to becoming worthy of that title. If you're serious about making amends, focus on your own rehabilitation. Use your time in prison to understand why you were vulnerable to Sarah's manipulation. Learn to value honesty over comfort, reality over fantasy. Become someone our daughters can respect, even if they choose not to have a relationship with you. I hope you find genuine peace and growth in the years ahead. Our family has found both, and we're stronger than we've ever been. Camilla. I mailed the letter the next morning, feeling lighter than I had in months. Not because I'd forgiven Derek. Forgiveness might come someday, or it might not. But because I'd chosen grace over bitterness. That afternoon, Ruby found me reading in the cabin's sunroom. Mom, I'm proud of you for writing back to Dad. Why? I asked, surprised. Because it shows us that healing doesn't require hatred, she said simply. You can acknowledge someone's humanity without excusing their crimes. That's a lesson I'll carry with me forever. As I watched my daughter return to her studies, I realized that the letter exchange had been less about Derek and more about showing Hazel and Ruby that strength and compassion could coexist. They were learning that forgiveness was a choice made for the forgiver's peace, not the offender's comfort. Our family's hearing was nearly complete, and we'd found something even more valuable than justice. We'd found wisdom. 5 years after Derek and Sarah began serving their sentences, I stood in the grand ballroom of the Ocean View City Marriott, surrounded by 300 guests celebrating the 5th anniversary of Morrison Family Legal Services. What had started as a solo practice focused on property law had grown into one of the most respected family advocacy firms in the state, specializing in protecting victims of financial fraud and domestic betrayal. Mom, you look incredible, Hazel said, adjusting the diamond necklace I'd bought myself for this milestone, not with stolen money or gifts from a cheating husband, but with the profits from building something meaningful and lasting. Ruby appeared beside us, radiant in her marine biology graduate degree regalia. She'd just been accepted to a prestigious PhD program in coral reef conservation, funded entirely by the college account we'd rebuilt stronger than before. 5 years ago, did you ever imagine we'd be here? She asked, gesturing around the elegant ballroom filled with clients, colleagues, and community leaders who'd become part of our extended family. Honestly, I looked around at the celebration of everything we'd built from the ashes of Derek's betrayal. I imagined surviving. I never imagined thriving like this. The evening's program was set to begin, and I took my place at the podium, looking out at faces that told the story of our transformation. My parents sat in the front row, my father completely recovered from his heart surgery, thanks to the medical funds we'd recovered and rebuilt. Jasmine beamed from her table, surrounded by the legal team she'd helped me assemble. Marcus Sterling raised his champagne glass in a toast from the back of the room.
5 years ago, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom, I discovered that my husband had stolen nearly $500,000 from our family to fund an affair with a professional con artist.
Tonight, I stand before you as the founder of a firm that has recovered over $12 million for families betrayed by financial fraud. The applause was thunderous, but I held up my hand to continue. This firm wasn't built on revenge or bitterness. It was built on the understanding that betrayal, while devastating, can also be transformative. Every family we've helped, every dollar we've recovered, every criminal we've exposed has made our community stronger and safer. I looked directly at my daughters, who had grown into remarkable women despite, or perhaps because of, everything they'd witnessed. My daughters taught me that healing doesn't require hatred, that strength can coexist with compassion, and that the best response to betrayal is to build something beautiful in its place. As I spoke, I noticed a familiar face near the back of the room. Detective Ray Garrison, now retired but still a close friend, was pointing towards someone near the entrance. I followed his gaze and felt my heart skip a beat. It was Derek. He looked older, thinner, wearing a simple gray suit that hung loose on his diminished frame. His hair had gone completely silver, and his face bore the weight of 5 years in federal prison. But his eyes held something I hadn't seen in over a decade: genuine humility. I paused my speech, my mind racing. Derek wasn't supposed to be released for another 2 years. What was he doing here? Ray caught my eye and nodded toward the exit, indicating he'd handled the situation quietly. But before he could move, Ruby stood up from her table. "It's okay, Mom," she called out clearly. "We knew he was coming." The ballroom fell silent. Every guest turned to look between my daughter and the man standing awkwardly at the back of the room. "We knew?" I asked, my microphone carrying my confusion to the entire gathering. Hazel stood beside her sister. "Dad was released early for good behavior and cooperation with investigators. He's been helping the FBI track down other victims of financial con artists. He asked if he could attend tonight, and we said yes." I stared at my daughters, these incredible women who'd found a way to honor their father's humanity while maintaining their own dignity and boundaries. "He's not here to disrupt anything," Ruby continued. "He just wanted to see you succeed, to witness what you've built from what he destroyed." Derek took a tentative step forward, his hands clasped in front of him like a penitent child. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible, even with the ballroom's perfect acoustics. "I don't expect to be welcomed here," he said slowly. "I don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation. I just wanted to see with my own eyes the incredible woman I was too blind to appreciate when I had the chance." He looked around the ballroom at the celebration of success built on the ashes of his betrayal. "Camilla, you've created something extraordinary. You've turned the worst thing I ever did into a force for protecting other families. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to understand what I threw away." The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Then, unexpectedly, I found myself speaking. "Thank you for saying that," I said, my voice steady but not unkind. "And I'm glad you're working to help other families avoid what we went through." I looked at my daughters, drawing strength from their remarkable grace and wisdom. "But this celebration isn't about the past, Derek. It's about the future we've built without you. You're welcome to stay and see what we've accomplished, but understand that your presence here changes nothing about the life we've created." Derek nodded, tears visible in his eyes. "I understand. Thank you for not having me thrown out." "We don't throw people out for being broken," Hazel said gently. "We just don't let broken people break us anymore." The applause that followed was different from before. Not just celebration, but recognition of something profound about healing, strength, and the choice to respond to pain with purpose. I continued my speech, though the energy in the room had shifted to something deeper and more meaningful. "Tonight represents more than business success," I said. "It represents the truth that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning of a better one." Later, as the evening wound down, Derek approached our family table with obvious hesitation.
My parents greeted him with polite distance, while Jasmine watched with protective suspicion. "I'm working as a construction laborer now," he told us quietly. "My architectural license is gone forever, but I'm learning to build things with my hands again. Honest work for honest pay." "That's good, Dad," Ruby said simply. "Honest work is healing work. I wanted you to know that I've been putting 20% of every paycheck toward additional restitution, beyond what the court ordered. It's not much, but it's something."
I looked at this man who had once been my husband, my partner, the father of my children. He was smaller now, humbled by consequences and time, but perhaps more human than he'd been in years. "I hope you find peace, Derek," I said, and meant it. Real peace, built on truth and honest work. "I hope so too," he replied. "But more than that, I hope I never forget the cost of lies and selfishness. Some lessons are too important to forget." As Derek left that night, walking alone into the parking lot, my daughters stood beside me at the ballroom windows. "Do you think he's really changed?" Hazel asked. "I think he's learned the difference between who he was and who he could be," I replied. "Whether he becomes that better person is up to him." "And us?" Ruby asked. "Are we okay with having him in our lives occasionally?" I considered the question carefully. We're strong enough to handle occasional contact with someone who's genuinely trying to be better, but our happiness doesn't depend on his redemption, and our future isn't tied to his past. As we drove home to the cabin that night, the cabin that was truly ours now, redecorated and reclaimed, I reflected on the extraordinary journey we'd traveled, from betrayal to justice, from devastation to triumph, from a broken family to an unbreakable one. Derek's theft had been meant to destroy us. Instead, it had revealed strength we never knew we possessed. Sarah's con had been designed to devastate families. Instead, it had inspired a career protecting others from similar predators. Most importantly, we'd learned that transformation wasn't about forgetting the past or pretending it didn't hurt. It was about choosing to build something beautiful from the rubble of what was destroyed. 5 years later, we were more than survivors. We were thrivers, builders, protectors. We were a family that had looked betrayal in the face and chosen to become stronger rather than bitter. And that, I realized, as we pulled into our driveway at the place where this journey began, was the greatest victory of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.